Hello, everyone. Welcome to this last week of YOLA National at Home. We're here today to have a session with four of my colleagues. Actually, I should start with, hi, I'm Phil Bravo. I'm the Associate Director of Social Innovation here at the LA Phil. Today, we're excited to have a session with four of my colleagues from across YOLA who run our four YOLA sites to talk specifically about distance learning insights. We'll meet them in just a moment. But first, just a reminder, throughout the session, feel free to put any questions you have in the chat. My colleague, Emily Lair, will be in the background reviewing all of those questions so that we can get to those at the end of the session. We're really excited to welcome our four administrators here who oversee our sites coming on camera right now. I'd love to just start with a quick introduction. If you could just share, if you can give your name, the role, organization that you work for in partnership with the LA Phil and YOLA, how long you've been with YOLA, and what drew you to this role to begin with. Gracia, would you like to start?
Yeah, my name is Gracia Serrano Navarro. I've been with the YOLA organization for about 5 years now. I started off as a teaching artist at the YOLA at Torres site and then moved into an admin role at the YOLA at Camino Nuevo site, which is partnered with Camino Nuevo Charter Academy. And I primarily chose to get involved with YOLA because I come from a similar background as our students, and I really wanted to get involved in an organization that was dedicated to supporting that cause.
That's great. Jose?
Hi, my name is Jose Mesa. I am the program manager for the YOLA Expo site. I've been working with Harmony Project for 3 years and working at the with YOLA for 2 years. What drew me to working with YOLA or Harmony Project, similar to Gracia, is I come from a similar background. I was born in LA. I'm an artist, and this work fits my personal mission. So, yeah.
How about Ian?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Ian Richard. I'm the program manager for YOLA at Torres. I've been with the LA Philharmonic now for about 3.5 years. And the reason that I came to this work is just a passion for music education and making sure that everyone has access to the highest possible quality music education. Yeah, so that's what I'm here for.
Great. And last but certainly not least, Jackie. You are muted, Jackie.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Jacqueline Munguia. I work for the YOLA at Heart of Los Angeles site. And I'm a program manager, and I've been there for about 3 years. And what drew me to this work, similar to Grecia and Jose, is that, yeah, I also was a young kid in LA learning classical music. So that's been a huge part of my life, and just really wanted to start working with youth again at the moment that I started working here.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Just to start, it would be wonderful to hear just an overview of what's been the approach. So it was Friday in March, and schools were open, and there was a faint rumbling that we might need to possibly hold up programming for 2 weeks, but then I'm sure we'll be back. And by Monday, schools were closed and have not been open since, and we've shifted all of our programming to the digital space. I'm curious, how did your site get started on digital learning, and just what overall have you focused on as you've shifted to a digital environment for all of the YOLA programming? Ian, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. I can take that one on. The primary concern for us at YOLA at Torres when we realized that we were going to be online for some time, so this is maybe Wednesday of the week following the shutdown, is that you know, our teachers and myself, we really wanted to focus on making sure that there wasn't an interruption in instruction, because we wanted to make sure that the students could continue to receive that instruction and that there was kind of a sense of normalcy. And so what we did is really quickly pivoted to online platforms, specifically the Band platform, which is kind of like a group platform similar to Facebook, but more private, in case you're familiar with that. And then to shift all of our programming there and via Zoom. So our focus was really on making sure that there was continuity of programming for our students and for our families, and that there wasn't an interruption there. And sort of to mixed results. I feel like it was great that we managed to do that, but there are things that I certainly would have changed, you know, going back and doing it again.
That's great. And I definitely, you know, coming back around to what are those things that we might have done differently would be something to definitely talk about later on. Grecia, would you like to share?
Yeah, so similar to Ian, we also wanted to have that consistent presence with our students. We originally started by using Google Sites, just kind of as a temporary space where we would upload videos or sheet music or activities and any lessons that the teaching artist would come up with, until we transitioned them over to Camino Nuevo network emails, which then let us use Google Classrooms in a private setting. All of the Google Classrooms in the Camino Nuevo charter system are controlled by their IT department, and it was just a safer and an easier way to get the kids on board because they were learning how to use that platform in their in-school classes. So we wanted to both keep that consistency, but also align with all of the new digital literacy that the students were learning. So that was our approach, and it's been really successful so far. Google Classroom has a lot of tools on it. You can assign homework, you can create Google Meets, you can have streams similar to maybe what, like as Eden was saying, a Facebook kind of look. And then you can also send emails really easily. All of the kids are already connected to the school system, so the tech is really easy. We have a whole department that we can use because we've aligned with the Camino Nuevo systems, and now we're continuing to use it into our summer and fall programming, and the teachers have grown immensely using that platform. So you can also attach other platforms such as Seesaw, or I believe Flat, or other platforms that are useful for music education. So overall, there have been some growing pains for everybody, but I think it's really awesome to see the new skill sets that the teachers and the students are developing.
That's wonderful. And I think after we hear from Jose and Jackie, it might be nice to actually get a quick tour maybe of the way that you've set up Google Classrooms. Jackie, can you share kind of how YOLA at OLA and Heart of LA have transitioned?
Yeah, it was definitely sudden. And I think for us, because we really we didn't know which platform would be best, we just decided to go ahead and go with Google Classroom. And because our organization at OLA, we're already using the Google like email G Suite. So we decided to go with Google Classroom, as well as Zoom. So that was a big platform. But at first, we decided to just open the Google Classrooms, make them for all of our teachers. And I think part of the issues with Google Classroom was that not everybody had a Google email, which is what's required to use it. So I think that was one of our first challenges, where we were trying to get parents to get on the platform and students, so that we can talk about challenges, I don't know, maybe at a later question or now.
I don't know what you're talking about. Well, there are no challenges. It's just been an uninterrupted series of successes here.
We've just had perfect experiences. Yeah, so that was one. One of our teachers decided to use Band because that teacher also works at the Torres site, and so I think Band functioned really well for him. And I think it's just been ongoing, trying to see. I think some other teachers are trying to use Band as well. And I think the most consistent platform for us has been Zoom. So getting that live interface between teachers and students.
That's great. And you bring up a really good point around that idea of digital literacy, which it's been kind of from, for a lot of our families, going from not being very comfortable at all and looking at paper forms to now making this shift to everything being digital by necessity, which has been interesting, I know, for all 4 sites. Jose, from the YOLA at Expo Center and Harmony Project perspective.
Yeah, so I just think it's funny because I think back to like the Wednesday before everything happened. And we had a YOLA camp meeting and we had no idea this was gonna happen. We kind of like knew something was happening, but then got that call on Thursday. Me being like the planner was like coming up with all these ideas and plans and ways we can transition online, which is something that I was looking forward to doing pre-COVID. But you know, our directors were like, okay, we're going to shift our focus a little bit from transitioning directly into online learning. And we wanted to check in with our families. So we, all of us called every single family in the program. And so for the YOLA at Expo site, that was over 200 parents. So it took quite a while. But as we remember, I remember it being like, every week was a little bit different. Every day seemed like there was something new happening. So that allowed us some time to really look for the best way to go about transitioning online. And a lot of it came from this team. And yeah.
That's great. And I think I definitely want to come back around to that idea of those calls that were made to parents. And I know each of our different sites really took a hard look at what that shift meant for how we needed to support our families. But first and foremost, as a music program, it feels like everyone dove in immediately on what are the things we can do to have a continuity of programming for students. Ian, you mentioned that continuity right at the start. I'd like to take a second just to look at some of those platforms that you mentioned and what you've been using specifically at each of our sites to talk through kind of how you have been making that transition and how you've kept that continuity for students who went from being at our sites anywhere up to 5 days a week to suddenly entirely online. Grecia, if you would be willing to share a little bit of a walking tour of the way that you have your Google Classroom set up. And as you're pulling that up, I think just to mention, it is interesting that of our 4 sites, YOLA at Camino Nuevo is partnered in school. So as Grecia mentioned, they're integrated with the same structures that the students have. So their school email address, et cetera. So that allowed for a lot of these things. And that partnership has been really, really a source of strength throughout this. But Grecia, please take it away.
Yeah, so this is our Google Classroom. You can see over here that I have a million Google Classrooms right now. So you can definitely set up as many as you want for how many groups you have going on. You can see the live streams here, and you can also see how you can send only to a specific group of kids. So if you only want to send it to the violin section, you're able to do that. You have Google Meets, which are a link similar to Zoom. You can also post it up here if you change the format a little bit, but you can join the classroom just by sending an invite through their email or giving them the class code, which is nice to have 2 ways of doing that. Here you can see some of the work that the teaching artists have put up. So they've had some housekeeping up here. They have their contact, their Google Meet link, and down here you get into their lesson planning. So it's been awesome to see them kind of transition into teaching a lot more about notation and about composers and cultural things about music. So here they chose to do some Composer of the Week lessons. And they love doing these Google Slides. So you can have the kids, it's really nice for the kids to just walk through Google Slides. As you can see here, it kind of keeps everything organized for them. And you can embed videos or just, you know, input pictures really easily. Here I think is a video, yeah. So Google Slides has been one function that they've taken advantage of. They've also had some of the teachers have put in playlists in here, so they have YouTube connected and they can go to the YouTube. Yeah, so they go to the YouTube playlist and the kids can kind of go through music and listen to what the teachers are listening to or what the teachers recommend, which is really cute. They've also put up videos of themselves performing here. I want to respect the teacher's privacy and not put her on blast. Here's a great resource that we've all been using across YOLA, and it kind of walks the kids through, especially the younger ones, in a really user-friendly way, again with the Google Slides, on how to tune their instrument, and it tells them all of the different parts of the instrument and what they'll need to do in the videos to get to do that. So you can see these really great step-by-step instructions of that. And they do it for the bass too. If you're a bass player, don't worry, there's one in there for you. And then they have their section content split up in the Google Classroom. So you can see all the viola, cello, and bass work that's in there. I'm trying to find a form for you so you can see how that looks, because the Google form has also been really, oh yeah, here we go. The Google form has been really useful for the TAs just to ask really quick questions and continue to teach them how to navigate all of these different ways of interacting with the internet and with computers. So here you also see that it has a similar field to the Google Slides. And here they're talking about their Seesaw app. So like I said, it can connect to Google Classroom, and this is the teacher walking them through that. And she also has a couple of videos of herself, and she kind of gets a little pulse check on how they felt about it at the end. So it's a good way to also get a little bit of assessment in with the Google Forms. And I really quickly wanted to show you what we did at the beginning, which was the Google site, which is a really easy to use platform. If you can't get them all on the same email network, you can customize it really easily. You can embed a lot of stuff in there. So this is how we started off, and then eventually we transitioned over back to Google Classroom. But yeah, any questions, Phil, that you might think the audience might have?
One thing I would ask as we're looking at all of that, and it's just a remarkable amount of content. The two things I would love for you to speak to is one, what were the prompts to teachers? We're seeing amazing video content being made. We're seeing that tuning tutorial that Laura Wall put together that was remarkable. And I know a number of our teachers at other sites use that. I'm curious about what what the prompt was to teachers as they created that. And then if you can also speak to what's the balance as you look at that platform between teachers meeting with students live on Zoom or Google Meets versus students engaging with that content on their own time?
Yeah, the prompt was, we're in a pandemic. do what you can. And then it kind of turned into this, well, we've got to give them something to keep them busy, and that's why the Google site was helpful. But again, we didn't really know how they were interacting with it, so that's why the Google Classroom became helpful, because they could turn stuff in, or they can turn forms in. And then eventually we're much more Google Meet heavy, because the kids, we serve a younger population of students, and it's really great to have them continue to have those social interactions, but also encourage them to move their bodies. Some of our teachers are really gung-ho about movement activities to music, and it's awesome to watch like the intricate movement videos that they posted at the beginning. It was, like virtual backgrounds under the sea to the aquarium, things like that, where they really got into it. And then they started to realize how much work it was and how much more effective it would be to scale it back and try to actually have that face-to-face interaction with the kids. So we're still looking at how to figure out the balance. And I didn't show you any of the videos that they did, but some of our students continue to not have instruments. So sometimes they have to teach these lessons both on an instrument and off an instrument. So using a paper towel roll instead of teaching it on an actual instrument. And that's just to continue to build those muscles, even though they're not getting the reward of listening to what they're working on. We still want them to keep those muscles strong, like using a pencil for their bow hold. So things like that, we're still feeling the challenge of continuing our program through distance learning. But I think we're kind of trying to find the middle ground between Google Classroom content and Google Meets.
That's wonderful. Thanks so much, Gracia. Ian, can you talk to us a little bit about the way you've been using the band platform and kind of the different things that you've looked to at YOLA at Torres?
Sure thing. Just give me a second to pull that up right here. So everyone should now have sort of my band home screen. So the advantage of the Google Classroom being that there are a lot of different Google apps that link into it, and it's more dedicated to actual teaching, is not the same advantages that you get from a band platform. The advantages of the band platform is really that it is very, very simple to use. Basically, if you've ever been in a Facebook page before, you know how to use a band page. And also that it provides for sort of like a little bit more, I feel like a social interaction, because everyone can kind of post in it. That's like positives and negatives depending on how likely your students are to sort of troll each other. Our students have been great, but there have been just a few circumstances, just like, I don't know, just like in a classroom where you have to be like, you know, you should probably use nicer words when you're telling someone that they need to adjust their bow hold. So those kind of things do happen online too. And so just making sure that you're addressing them is important. But the platform is great because it's super simple, and it can also handle a lot of connection with other types of media or other apps. And so that's why we chose to go to it too. Is it something that I will stick with for the long run? I don't know. I like that it doesn't require to have a specific kind of email address. I like that the band pages are private so that we can have control over them. But it organizationally, it's a little bit difficult, and there are things within Google Classroom that I kind of wish this could do. So anyway, that's quick ups and downs, but here's what YOLA at Torres looks like right now. So for each of the classes that we teach, we have one of these little tiles. You can see that the tiles are customizable. So we have Baby Yoda with a cello, or maybe that's a violin that looks like a cello. I think
it's an H-size violin.
Yeah, and I don't know about that bow hold. We'll have to call and see what's going on there. But so each of these is basically a classroom. And when you click on one, let's go here. What you get is, again, a page that looks very much like a Facebook page. And we have files that the teachers can upload so that students can go and look at those files, whether they be MP3 or if they're videos, or you can see over here that it'll also hold all the recent files and music. So it's nice to have that kind of bin. And then also, and I haven't looked at these comments, so yeah, it looks like it's mostly logistics, but people are able to comment on things so that you can keep all of the assignments in one place. And it's also searchable if you look up here at the top, keyword, hashtag, and name. So you can search for specific things if you just wanted to pull up whatever on the page. So it's very much like a Facebook page. It is organized in terms of time, and it's good at integrating with other systems, but it doesn't contain a whole lot of systems itself. So this is just the violin page. Obviously, there's a page for each of the instruments, and the teachers kind of take care of those pages, which is really useful. There was a question, and I don't necessarily think we need to dive into all the questions right now, but one of the questions that came in was just how to encourage students to participate in online programming, because like we're all, I think, seeing a drop in participation that we're like, ooh, what do we do about that? And so there's a couple answers there, but one of the things that I wanted to just highlight was opportunities for students to interact in spaces that are sort of vaguely musical, but not necessarily music focused. So we created a baking theory class for this summer where our students did and have been doing some baking together online. And so you can see they made pizza one day. And the idea is that not only is this just a time for them to be, digitally in the kitchen together doing things, but it's also an opportunity for them to interact without feeling the pressure of needing to learn or perform. And that is one of the biggest draws for our students to continue to come to classes. So, if you want to be in baking theory class, you got to make sure you show up for your sectionals and that you're taking care of the rest of what you need to do. So this has just been a big success that I wanted to share, and shout out to Dr. Karen if she's out there for this idea and just making it happen. And you can see all this delicious looking food that everybody is putting together. Anyway, that's what the band platform looks like. That's kind of the things that it can do. You can see it has a bunch of apps here, but I don't want to take up too much time.
And I think that general idea of having this showing up in person and online is a habit, right? And we were asking students to form new habits to show up and be in this online space. And the thing that I loved through things like baking theory, but also through the things we've seen at the other sites, have really been trying to lower the, especially initially, lower that threshold for interaction. So can you speak really, just to build that habit, build that muscle of showing up and participating? Can you talk a little bit, Ian, for one moment, and then we'll go over to Jose, about, my memory is that at the very start, because not every student could be online or on Zoom based on what their technology would allow, you had kind of a policy of what constituted attendance. They had to interact a certain number of times. Can you speak to that, just as we talk about attendance? What attendance even means shift at the start of this for you?
Right. So for context, our site, when we were in person, students were coming to the site between 3 and 5 times a week for more than an hour each time, sometimes up to 3 hours. So it was a pretty time-intensive program when we were in person. It's designed that way, sort of inspired by the Sistema systems, but also with the knowledge that this work requires a lot of input to it. And so making sure we're respecting that. Now, when we moved to the online platforms, the original schedule and the way that we wanted to keep things consistent was that the original schedule just stayed. So we didn't really want to move class times, class attendance around. What we wanted to do was keep things consistent for parents and students moving through. And what happened there is that it was good for the students in terms of the consistency, but not so good in terms of, like, it doesn't necessarily make sense to have just an hour and a half Zoom sectional with 20 students in the room at the same time, because you're not getting nearly as much done as if you have, 5 students in 4 pods and 20 minutes for each of the pods. Like, it's just the reality of Zoom. So for the summer, we ended up changing that to actually be designed for online programming, to where each of the teachers communicated with their students and finding the time that kind of worked for everybody the best. And honestly, the best thing that I can say there is when we were able to really make things work, it's when we went directly to the families and asked questions. I think just the idea that the most important thing, it sounds so simple, but it is really so important, and I can't highlight it enough to say what do you want this to be if this program is really for you, and how would it best work for you? So tell us when the right time is. Tell us when, what you're interested in doing, what you're interested in learning, and then we'll design from there. And so whereas the spring was very analogous to in-person, the summer is sort of bespoke for online learning and much more directed at the desires of the students. Now, in terms of the actual attendance, which was Phil's first question, What we saw initially was basically a drop from near 100% participation in in-person programming to about 50% participation in online programming. So that was the initial drop. And I think just like the rest of you all out there, it's just it's heartbreaking to see that happen, and you sit there and wonder like, oh my gosh, what did we do wrong? And in order to make sure that all our students could participate, we did something similar to what Jose was doing, where we did a series, not just a single go around of calls, but a series of calls to our students about online programming and how it works, and literally playing tech support on the phone to get people onboarded. Because as simple as it seems, sitting here in front of my desktop, it's much more complicated when there's a phone, you're trying to talk on the phone and open an email and click on a link and put the verification email all on a phone. Now it's possible, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world. So I think understanding where each family is in terms of familiarity with tech and also availability of technology was also a really important thing to do, and to make sure that we were acknowledging as we worked to increase attendance, and creating those spaces for our students to interact in a zero pressure environment. Part of the draw is just being social. And so that also helped for attendance to come back up. I may have over answered and under answered that question.
It was all interesting. So I know we touched on a number of platforms already, Google Sites, which then moved to Google Classrooms, Google Meets as a part of that, and obviously Zoom. We'll list all these at the end. Seesaw, band.us, flat.io, I believe. Jose and then Jackie, what are some of the things that you've been doing? I know that some things are in line with what we've just heard. What are some of the other ways that you've been approaching that at, we'll start with Jose at YOLA at Expo specifically.
Yeah, so early on, like I was saying, we kind of took a pause in programming for about a month, actually. So for the first 2 weeks, it was the wellness calls, and we actually broke up into teams to tackle a lot of the new needs that we had. So I think the problem we face here on an online platform like this, or like we just didn't, there was too many people sending resources. There were too many platforms being suggested. It was just too much information coming out all at once, I think, in the beginning. And I think making those teams really helped. We kind of took inspiration from YOLA at OLA for their survey. I think that they that survey that helped us really see what access students had to devices was really helpful. So most students had cell phones, and also about 60% had computers from on our end. So we had that in mind as we were going to use these platforms. But the ways we used our, I'm going to just share this really quick. The ways we used our websites or our Google sites is that we made it super simple. I think a lot of information was coming out at that time, and just saying, download band, you'll figure it out later. Like, you figure out how you download it. I'm not going to give you instructions. Really helped. And that's something I learned. I was like, just tell them to download band. And everybody successfully downloaded band. We did have to help a few people. And then we sent out very simple video instructions. But the other ways we've used our Google site is to put up our wellness resources that our wellness team put together. And Nicole Mauricio, who's part of the YOLA Expo team, did a lot of work in putting this together for our families. And so when we were making phone calls, it was easy for us to send that over, refer them to this site, or send them a specific resource. And I kind of just wanted to share how we just formatted everything very simply so that they can find their teacher, Mr. Jonathan, who's awesome. And they just found their class, click on their, on whatever class they're part of, and it would take them to their class. This is kind of how our band platform looks like. And one of our colleagues actually started their own community page for their site, and we thought it was a great idea. So I kind of just wanted, I did see a question which I'm going to answer right now, is how we kind of got our parents involved, is by making a space for them. A lot of our parents used to spend hours at Expo waiting for their students to get out of rehearsal. And so they have very long term friendships that they've built there. So we provided a space for them to interact. So some of the ways that the kids are interacting is there's a way to make a challenge on band, and they're doing practice challenges. This is our third round, and some students really, a lot of the younger students take it seriously. This week we're doing HB Spirit Week, which yesterday was like crazy hair day, and you can see all the crazy hair submissions. Here's mine. I'm just using a filter. Yeah, the easy way out. And yeah, so we're announcing who got first place in these practice challenges, and they're really motivated by this. This was our first one. But we also made a space for our families to talk to each other during the week. So during the week, on Thursday mornings, we would have our parent coffee hour. And so it slowly grew, and these coffee hours would end up being anything from how is it going at home, to looking at old videos. There was always some kind of emotional part of it. Somehow it was unintentional, it just happened. And so I got to know so many of the parents through Zoom. I think at our site we have some space issues, so we don't always have like meetings and things like that. But I got to know so many of the parents through Zoom, and I'm excited to bring some of these things to the site once we are back. We also started orchestra hangouts. This was our like 2 weeks ago. They drew penguins. We do trivia, music trivia. And yeah, the students are still engaged, even though we're not in programming right now. And we were just able to share a lot of our events and things like that on that page, also eliminating a lot of questions from parents. So we were able to really maximize how parents can engage on band by adding that community page.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
I think you're
Phil,
muted.
yeah, I think
I am
there
muted.
you
I
go.
know it happens. They're used to this from our meetings on multiple times a week of just Phil, you're muted. It's a refrain.
It's usually because we're the ones muting him.
Yeah, fair enough. But Jose, I think the thing that I appreciated you saying was that idea of sometimes we get so concerned about what struggles might happen with our parents or what information that they need, that sometimes saying download it, like work through that and giving them some time and space to navigate it, and then provide them enough space for support, I think is a really great takeaway. Jackie, as we're looking at a lot of that work that Jose and Yola and his team and Nicole and Clarence did at their site, I'm curious if you could share. It really points to this idea that while we are a music program, we are so much more, and especially as the challenges of this situation starting in March came up, it also meant that we had a lot of opportunity to engage with our parents and really deepen those relationships. Can you talk a little bit more about the approach that you and your team took at YOLA at OLA?
Yeah, so a part of OLA's big focus during this quarantine time was to really check in with our families, check in with our parents, check in with students in a more sort of wellness check level. So we ended up creating this huge spreadsheet with all of our students and just information. Are they connected to the internet? Do they have internet at home? Do they have, what devices do they have? So all of these things, and thanks for reminding me, Jose, that I did that tech survey. I'm glad it was helpful. I'm like, that's right. I think I just brain dubbed the last 3 months for survival. Yeah, so I think that was one of the first things. I ended up creating a tech survey to send out to parents. And another big thing that we use is Remind. So the Remind app is like huge and really, really helpful for us because not all parents use email, but most parents do have a phone where they've received text messages. So that was one of our biggest tools to use to send out these surveys as well. And not everybody fills out the surveys, right? Not everybody is connected or is able to navigate a Google survey in that way. But we do get a lot of responses back. And yeah, so as much as we could fill out through the survey, then we just started making phone calls. And a lot of the main questions were like food security, rent security, or rather, were they able to pay rent? Were they struggling with rent? And then just asking about just economic stability in terms of, did anybody lose their jobs during this? Did parents lose hours at work? So these were things that our organization, Heart of LA, really, really wanted to emphasize throughout programming. So we had a lot of support in that way. And yeah, so we ended up dividing this list through our teachers. And again, it was Spanish-speaking teachers. We have a predominantly Spanish-speaking student base. So yeah, so our teachers have actually been having to take on a lot of these phone calls and calling students that aren't always their own students. So they've also been able to form relationships with just a wider range of families in our program. And I guess another cool thing that YOLA has been able to provide is actually having some funds for emergencies. So we've been able to provide students with grocery cards 3 times in 3 different, rounds of grocery cards of $200 value for a local grocery store, and which has been very helpful. We've had very positive feedback from parents and families saying, thank you so much. That's pulled me through a couple weeks of food. And just partnering with other organizations nearby to, so we also have a weekly grocery bag pickup for students and families. So that's been like a big help for families. And of course, there's other struggles that our families have, like connectivity to internet, or the more we're in this, the more expensive it gets, which is something we've been hearing more and more from families. Like internet's becoming something difficult to pay, or just having more resources for connectivity and computer literacy is like a huge thing.
Thank you for sharing, Jackie. And really, just to give Heart of LA a shout out, that kind of the same thing that Jose mentioned, the both of you were really constant in talking about our families are being inundated, right? It's wonderful, but there's so much information so quickly about what resources are available for unemployment, what resources are available for home security, what resources are available, and they weren't all necessarily applicable to every family based on their individual situations.
Yeah, sorry, I did forget to talk about the resource pages that YOLA made. So YOLA had a team completely dedicated to researching local resources. So if there was a school that was giving out food, like YOLA knew where that address was, and they compiled, documents that we could share out with families as we make our phone calls, or through email if they had email. And it ranged from, yeah, and even like rent assistance, just keeping on top of all of the different opportunities that the city of Los Angeles had for residents in terms of rent relief, rent assistance, rent deferral. So all of these things, we were really every week just updating our parents with, you have rights, you don't need to pay if you lost your job, you can defer rent, you need to keep turning in this form. These are the COVID testing sites. So there was a lot of that we were able to do with a lot of support from YOLA.
Yeah, thank you so much for remembering that. And I think if you could actually even put in the chat the website for Heart of LA for that page of resources. I know that we only have about 10 minutes left, so to close up this, I want to get to the many questions that we have, and I have a couple that I'll focus on. But Ian or Grecia, do you have anything else to follow up before we move into some Q&A?
No, I just wanted to, because we work with younger students, the parent literacy is basically the student literacy. So I would encourage everyone to just start whatever platform you decide to use, and to get them to start participating, also make that a really low barrier to entry. Some of our teaching artists just started with type your name into the streams, or, see if you can find the link, or, all of these small ways to help them to start learning how to use the internet, not in a musical way first, is helpful for when we do need them to use it in a musical way. And that was really helpful for us. And I just wanted to shout out the LA Phil too for helping us with tech support whenever our students and families, a lot of our families have 2 students in the program, and they were able to provide some tech support in that way. So partnering with other organizations for those needs, if you can, was really helpful for our families to be able to get the right setup to participate.
That's great. And I also, as we're mentioning all of these connections with parents, obviously there's 4 of us on the call right now, but we're representative of a pretty significant team. And I know, Jose, I love seeing the pictures of the parent meetings, and I know that Melissa Constantino at YOLA had parent coffees, and I believe there were funny hats involved. And Carol at YOLA Torres is a constant support to our families. And I think that you said a really important thing about digital literacy, of the parent literacy is student literacy at that age. But I think that kind of, if you want our students to be successful within our program, making sure that the parents feel connected as well has really been something that's been a constant through line that I've seen from each of the 4 programs. So I am curious on a little bit more of a nuts and bolts issue. One of the first questions that came in was about the idea of teaching absolute beginners. And especially as we look towards a fall where we are going to be starting digital again. LA schools will be digital in the fall, and so YOLA programming will be as well. And we may have new students join the program. And I know that we've already been doing this. I'm curious, and I'm going to bundle this into a couple other things. Can anyone share what have you seen our amazing groups of teachers do to tackle that challenge of starting with an absolute beginner? And then with that, especially for younger students, tackling things like broken strings, tuning, those kinds of nuts and bolts things that we usually do for and with our students when they're with us in person. Does anyone want to jump in?
So we had 68 beginners who just started in February. That was fun. We have our own little oboe pandemic before this, and we got our oboes like the day everything closed. Literally, that was when our oboes were delivered. So we couldn't get them out to our students for a while. I think from trial and error, I think was great that the teacher just really went over every single aspect of the oboe. So when these kids got the oboe, they knew it all. Like they knew what this oboe did and how it worked. And everything. So I actually was like kind of shocked how easily they, how they just knew it that well. And they couldn't perform in our recital. And one of the awesome things that happened was that they presented on the oboe and a little bit of this different aspects and what they've learned, and they maybe played one note, but I think that that was just, I was so blown away by that.
Ian, I know that you just wrote a lovely treatise. You want to share a little bit of that?
Right. I was afraid that we weren't going to get to all the questions, so I just sort of started answering them in the chat. But the gist of the answer there, for those of you who are a little bit more curious, is my advice would be to the teachers, go, and this reflects what Jose is saying was a successful experience at his site, is go slow, be methodical, know exactly, in person, we have this luxury, or we had this luxury of being able to kind of explain it a little bit, but then you could just reach over and adjust the instrument and then it would feel right. And now we don't. And so knowing exactly as a teacher how you're going to approach setting up a bow hold or setting up an embouchure, down to the exact phrases, the exact words you're going to use, and in what order you're going to say them, is the best thing you could possibly do. And making sure that you have really clear visual aids to go along with that. And they don't have to be complicated. We've all seen those videos of like brass embouchures set up with like really nice little metal rings that have a little holding thing, and you can sort of see, it doesn't need to be that. You can accomplish the same thing with some pipe cleaners arranged in the correct way, and you still get that visual. But having some kind of really clear visual is really important. And then I've also seen some of the teachers who are a little bit more tech savvy set up multiple cameras. So that you have one camera that's sort of like a general use and one that's really directed at what you're doing on the instrument. And obviously not everybody has that means to get that set up, but if you can do it, I think that can also be something really effective. And then the other thing to say about absolute beginners is, like, don't feel like you have to start absolute beginners on instruments. And that might seem really obvious too, but there's so much to learn about music and to learn about making music that translates to the instrument that's not about the instrument. So singing is definitely a focus right now in our program, listening, making sure that we can match beat and match pitch, and that we can hear things that maybe couldn't otherwise have heard. So a little bit of maybe formal ear training, things like that are only going to make students more effective when they do transition to their instrument. So beginning students doesn't necessarily mean beginning instrumentalist students. And if you have great instrumentalists teaching in your program, and I'm sure all of you do, that means that they already have these skills too, and they learn them along the way somewhere. So that would be my suggestion.
And that
I'm gonna, can I piggyback, because our site is very heavy on strings, and also have a beginning box violin, paper violin set up for our second graders. And that's been how we're keeping our second graders engaged, now third graders, and continuing to practice those bow holds and how to hold the instrument and how to take care of the instrument. So they are beyond ready for a real instrument and they're eager to get one, but they are also still practicing those really essential skills for a violin student. We're also doing a lot of creative activities at our site now where they make their own instruments, which has been fun for the students to try and make their own box violin or make their own percussion instrument, or try and find different tones with different objects in their house. Actually getting them to explore their surroundings has been a really fun way to keep the younger kids engaged. There was one more thing I wanted to say, and now I forgot it. So I'm going to interrupt you in like 2 minutes when I remember.
That is perfect. We've got about 2 minutes to go. So I think that'll be right on time. So one of the other quick questions that we had, I know from a conductor in the audience, was about specifically not just the small group instruction, but with ensembles. Have any of our teachers, have we seen any great work with how to approach ensemble classes or section rehearsals, especially for our older students.
I can jump in on this, but I will say that I don't, none of this is gospel. So if you're doing something out there and it works better than what I'm about to describe, tell me about it because I'm interested. But basically, what we found is that trying to do large sectional or large ensemble rehearsals doesn't really function because of latency and because of the number of individual interactions that are trying to happen in a space where latency is kind of getting in the way. And so where we found success with large ensembles was doing individual recordings and then stitching those recordings together via a music editing app. I use Adobe Audition, but also Pro Tools or something similar to that. Audacity is a free program that you could use, but I'm not necessarily familiar with. But basically our approach to ensembles was we work with the students in smaller groups to teach the individual parts, a shorter part usually. I think our intermediate ensemble did like 3 minutes of an arrangement of Dance of the Tumblers. And then we took those individual recordings and stitched them together with an audio app. So it's not the same experience as sitting down in a room together and making music in the same space. But when you have that recording, then it feels like that from a recording standpoint if you do it right. And there's a whole set of tech things in the background that kind of have to go on. And of course, we're assuming that everybody is able to have a space to record, which I think is one of the larger barriers to that, is just not having a place where it feels okay to sit and play an instrument for a period of time. So those are certainly challenges, but yeah, my advice for larger ensembles and section rehearsals is, as much as you can, make that more individualized, and then the social piece that you miss from that is actually a different thing. So part of the beauty of orchestra rehearsal is rehearsing together, and part of it is the music making, and unfortunately they're kind of like separated. So creating individual spaces for those things, I think, are important.
And I know, thank you, Ian. And I know we need to wrap up. So I think to give you 30 seconds to think on your wrap up question, to kind of combine a couple of the questions we've gotten. What are some of the things that we actually, obviously we're dealing with a lot of challenges. What are some of the things that have been opportunities that now that you've done them, you look forward to actually making part of the program moving forward, regardless of whether we're digital or not? So if you take a couple of seconds to think on that, I want to offer one other response on the group instruction. With the YOLA National Festival, we've been doing some group instruction, and I have seen some of that faculty who are working in programs across the country have some success using everyone muted, playing together with one person playing at a time, which is very useful for technique, right? It's maybe not necessarily immensely satisfying from an orchestral rehearsal point of view, but especially our larger violin classes, we've had teachers that have been really successful having that kind of like one at a time, and then actually students feel almost more heard. A student who may be sitting at the back of the seconds in a rehearsal that doesn't often get heard individually has an opportunity to be heard and feel like a leader in that room. So there have been some opportunities in that space. And I think that balance between what Ian is talking about of individualizing instruction and finding ways to break down, instead of an hour and a half with everybody, 10 minutes or 20 minutes with individuals or smaller groups, has been really successful. The only other shout out I would give, Dan Trahey and his Collective Conservatory group have been doing a significant amount of creative work with large groups online, and they did a session with some students from across California last week, and they're going to share out about that on Friday in a session. So I would highly suggest you check out the work that they're doing. They use some other innovative things like drones that kids can play along with in their own room. So there's something musical for them to respond to that's not just silence. And I think that's, in the end, what students are wanting, we're finding, is that kind of not only personal connection, but the physical feeling of making music in response to something that they're hearing. And that opportunity to work with drones and you know, beat loops and things like that have been really successful on instrument. So to close up this session, what is something you're looking at carrying through and going forward? Why don't we just go straight around, Grecia?
I think that this situation has presented a huge opportunity for us to assess our students individually more. I think being able to record them, or them being technologically savvy enough to record themselves and submit it, gives us a better understanding of where they are and how they progress, and doing pre and post assessments. I'm really excited to have more data to back up what we're doing and to really show the students the progress that they're making.
Ian?
I think the most important thing for YOLA at Torres to continue moving forward is going to be the wellness checks that we're doing every 2 weeks. So we didn't really talk about them much, but it's now part of our program that each of our individual families gets a call just to check in and to see how they're doing, not about music, just about what's going on in their lives, and to help provide access to resources. And that's something that we are absolutely committed to continuing on in the future, and has really been super meaningful, I think, for our families during this, difficult time.
And a huge shout out to the teaching artists and staff that are making those calls. Just to say that this is all, there are so many people not in this room that are at work.
Yeah, no one who's making those kinds of calls is a specialist in that kind of thing. And that's been really beautiful to people to just like, well, it's what needs to be done, so let's do it. So yeah, shout out to those teaching artists and the admin staff across YOLA who are doing that kind of work.
All right, Jackie.
For me, I think a big thing to move forward with or in is just trying to get more parents to be more tech savvy. Just focusing more on that and figuring out how we can continue to support families to stay connected.
Wonderful. Jose.
And I have a really short list. I'll go through it really quick. I just think simpler, like direct communication is going to be awesome to like continue on. Consistent communication, Zoom meetings, because like we have space now to do them. And also just letting myself or just our program staff think outside the box and not like boxing ourselves into these rooms that we are working in. So yeah.
And I will give mine. That is, this group used to meet about once a month with all of our the administrative staff across our 4 sites, and now we're meeting multiple times a week, and just seeing you all work and learn from each other has been really inspiring, and we now have just this group of 80 plus human beings that are thinking about how to do this work better. And it's been really inspiring to see our teaching artists and our staff, program alumni, all of you. It's been really amazing to see. So I do know that there were a number of platforms that were mentioned: Soundtrap, Flat, Seesaw, Zoom, Google Suite, Upbeat, which Ian, hadn't even heard of that one yet. So now I have some things to look up. Audacity, Adobe, there are so many platforms. We'll look at a way to share out some of just some links and basic information on those. I encourage you to look up some other resources that are out on just how to use Zoom well, between breakout rooms, multiple cameras, and some lo-fi ways to do that, like log in on your phone while you're also on a computer. There are so many of those resources out there. But we'll try and pull something together to post that helps point to all of those. But thank you so much to the 4 of you for taking your time. Thank you everyone for putting some great questions in the chat. Later today at noon, I encourage everyone to tune in for a session with our YOLA National Institute students. This is a group of 22 students from across the country that have been working together over the course of the year and are going to be sharing out what they've worked on. We encourage you to be there for that. And everyone stay safe, stay healthy, and thank you so much for coming.